White House advisor Peter Navarro making a claim about the markets. He says they are, quote, finding the bottom now, finding the bottom. It comes, of course, as the trade war has taken its biggest toll, perhaps, on some of, well, definitely on some of the biggest companies in America and on one of the most successful ones. Take a look at Apple. Company shares down about 20% over the past 3 trading days. So just when you look at Apple, that wipes out about $640 billion in market cap. It's a stunning number. The context around it the other day, we were saying, look, that's more than Walmart has ever been worth in its entire existence. It's the largest non-governmental employer in the United States, Walmart, and Apple has lost that value in a few days. Veteran tech analyst Dan Ives is here with me now. He says Apple right now is in the eye of the tariff storm, a Category 5 hurricane. Trump's tariffs likely to triple the price of an iPhone, according to his analysis, as Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick claims that this will all benefit American workers who will make those iPhones.
The armies of millions of people. Well, remember, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones. That kind of thing is going to come to America. It's going to be automated, and great Americans, the trade craft of America, is going to fix them, is going to work on them.
All right, Dan Ives is out front now. He's the global head of tech research for Wedbush Securities. Dan, you've covered tech stocks on Wall Street for 25 years. That means you've been through the dot-com bubble, you've been through COVID, you've been through the Great Recession, you've been through the financial crisis, all of it. Here we are now. Have you seen anything like? No.
No, because it's self-inflicted. And in my opinion, it's an economic Armageddon, but especially for the tech industry. I mean, this would take the U.S. tech industry back a decade if these tariffs actually come through. And the reality is that it's all the hearts and lungs of the supply chain is in Asia. And that's why it's U.S. tech that's
So when Howard Lutnick says, as he said there to Margaret Brennan, the little screws to make iPhones, that kind of thing is going to come to America. It's going to be automated, and great Americans, the tradecraft of America, is going to fix them, is going to work on them.
That would be like me watching an NBA game being like, oh, it's easy to score a basket. The reality is it's the most complex supply chain in the world. And the way that they have 1.5 billion iPhones and they're able to make them at $1,000 is because of the supply chain that's really been built over the last decade. You build that in the US with a fab in West Virginia, New Jersey, there'll be $3,500 iPhones.
$3,500 iPhones.
And look, that is the true reality of saying it and doing it.
So let's lay this out. If you look at iPhone 16, iPhone 16 Pro Max, the prices you're paying now for the iPhone 16, $799. You know, what happens here to these things?
Well, first off, it would take Apple $30 billion in 3 years to move just 10% of the supply chain to the U.S.
$30 billion, 3 years to move 10% of the supply chain.
To move 10% of the supply chain.
Leaving 90% over there.
Leaving 90% over there. And for someone like myself that's traveled throughout Asia for decades, the reality of it, it's a fictional tale. And that's why I think you see what's happened to the stock, because no company is more caught up in this tariff, front and center in this Category 5 storm, than Cupertino and Apple, and that's the shame of it.
I mean, you look at, you talk about traveling through Asia, and maybe this brings it home. We actually looked at a map to say, where does Apple make iPhones? You know, where in Asia? I mean, there are hundreds of manufacturing sites in China. We'll throw the map up, hundreds of them. I mean, it is really stunning. I mean, we're just putting some of them there. Hundreds. I mean, this is actually about much more, as you point out, than cheap labor. I mean, this is massive infrastructure were you to transport it here.
But that's almost an impossibility, and that's why the stock is so. Because at the end of the day, the stocks they're not political. They know math and the reality. And when it comes to Apple, this would be, in my opinion, if this actually comes through, this would change the future of Apple, and that's what's so sad to some extent. As an American icon, you could have Beltway talking points, but this is the reality of it.
The reality on the ground. And also on that, and when we look at the stocks that have lost so much value, and obviously it's been the whole market, but that, what they call the Magnificent Seven, that it accounted for half of the growth last year in the S&P 500. They have plunged. They're in a bear market. On that list, Tesla. You've been one of the biggest fans for Tesla on Wall Street, but today you slashed your price target, which means where you think the stock is going to go by a massive amount, 40%.
I mean, the two things. I mean, one, tariffs. I mean, that hurts Tesla like every other automaker. And then China, that's been a core part of their demand story. And this is going to be more and more negative for them as they go up against domestic players. And we've talked about Musk. I mean, Tesla has become a political symbol globally. And that's been a very bad thing for not just stock in terms of unit sales and destruction. And we believe clock struck midnight for Musk. He basically is going to need to make the choice here. He cannot do this. And I think you've seen it in the stock in terms of reflected.
Well, maybe that's part of the reason he's been so aggressive on Peter Navarro in the past 24 hours.
Before many of President Trump's tariffs take effect, we know that some of the things that will likely cost you more at the grocery store now. So you might want to grab a pen and your shopping list as we go through the CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich is at a grocery store in New York to walk us through. Vanessa, how wide of an impact will Americans likely see?
Yeah, well, we're here at Morton Williams in New York City, and they say that they haven't seen that 10% universal tariff hit just yet. But when it does, it's going to hit perishable items, fruits and vegetables. For example, these bananas come from Costa Rica. These right over here come from Ecuador. These countries are now hit with a 10% tariff. I want to take you over to the seafood section really quickly, because this is where some of these higher tariffs, these higher reciprocal tariffs, are going to go into effect on Wednesday and hit seafood products. Let's look at the shrimp over here. Morton Williams gets their shrimp from Indonesia and Vietnam. We're talking about a 32% tariff from Indonesia, 46% from Vietnam, and the salmon over here, this is coming from Norway, and Norway is going to be hit with a 15% tariff. The U.S. imported about $1 billion worth of salmon last year. I also want to take you over to the coffee section. This is where these are non-perishable items. So these are items that hold a little bit longer, and companies may have been able to stockpile these items. However, we source here in the U.S. most of our beans from Central America, from Africa. Ethiopia, for example, is getting hit with a 10% tariff, as is Brazil. So the store here is bracing for those higher tariffs. I asked the owner, can he absorb them? The margins are so slim in the grocery store that he's not going to be able to absorb higher costs. He's going to have to pass them, unfortunately, down to the consumer.
Joining me right now is Sam Silverstein. He's a reporter for The Grocery Dive. Thanks so much, Sam, for coming in. From your reporting, what are you hearing in terms of how quickly that the industry thinks grocery shoppers are going to see the impact in pricing, and where?
I think it depends on the item. Certain items like produce are likely to see price increases more quickly than things like canned goods that last longer. But I will say it's very difficult to say which items might go up in price and even when that might happen. I mentioned things like produce, fresh goods, because they don't last so long and they need to move in stores quickly, so supplies have to keep being refreshed. For items that last longer, grocers might have supplies on hand, have things on the shelf, and it would take a while for even more expensive items to show up on the shelves. But I did want to note that for grocers, this is a really important time. They've already been through this messaging issue with consumers about what groceries cost, and of course that's because of the inflation that came out of the pandemic. And what I think we saw in a lot of grocery stores was an effort to show consumers that even if prices are going up, that grocers want to try to do what they can to help people stretch their budgets. And I would imagine that with the tariffs now threatening to raise prices, that you'll see grocery companies looking to show that they are on the side of the consumer and to demonstrate that they will do what they can to keep prices down. That's not to say that prices won't go up, but I do think grocery companies are going to have an incentive to do what they can to moderate those increases.
That's actually what I was going to ask you, because I was looking at statements from places like the National Grocers Association and how they're saying they hope this is resolved quickly to minimize the impacts on Americans and more. What are you hearing from grocers, from store owners, on what those options are in terms of trying to mitigate the hit that they're going to take and the consumer will take?
So I think one thing that grocers are trying to do is to find ways where they can absorb prices. And one way they might be able to do this is through private label goods. They've already been working hard on expanding their selection of private label items, and we've seen grocery companies work to promote those brands. their own brands and to show them not just to be ways to save money, but actually to get high quality goods. So companies like Costco, for example, with Kirkland Signature, they've built that brand into a whole lot more than just, a way to save money. But I think what we will see is that grocers are going to use this opportunity, as I said, to find ways to help people save money. So on staple goods, basic things, people are very sensitive to those prices. They know what they cost. They travel to probably multiple grocery stores, even in 1 week. And so people will notice if prices go up there. Grocers are cognizant of this. And that's an area where they can help to keep prices lower, if only because the competition is important there. I think that you will see grocers then look to higher margin goods as areas where they might be able to raise prices a bit if they need to compensate for the need to try to insulate consumers from price increases on items that they need more, the essential goods.